Welcome to the channel World's Undercurrents. It is commonly believed that Iran is a land of ayatollahs and oil, a country of revolutions and sanctions. It's a place people know from the news, but barely understand in essence. We tend to think its history starts somewhere deep in the textbooks, with Cyrus and Darius, with the Greco-Persian Wars. And then, abruptly, it ends, giving way to modern politics. But what if this whole premise is wrong? What if Iran isn't just one story? What if it's dozens of stories stacked on top of each other, like the layers of an ancient city, where every new foundation rests on the ruins of the last? Who built the first cities on this plateau? When the rest of the world was still living in huts, how did it happen that this exact place gave birth to the world's first system of state administration, the first postal road, and the first officially proclaimed principle of religious tolerance? Why did this land attract conquerors time and time again, only to swallow them up, digest them, and turn them into Persians? And what exactly is it about the Iranian soil, the Iranian air, the Iranian character that eventually made even the victors speak Persian, pray to Persian gods, and call themselves the heirs of Persian kings? This isn't just a story about one country. It's a story about how a civilization survives. It's about how a people conquered by Macedonians, Parthians, Arabs, Mongols, and Turks always found a way to remain themselves. It's about how power and faith intertwine so tightly that they can no longer be separated. It's about how the memory of the past becomes a weapon in the present. Chapter 1: The Land and the Early Civilizations. Let's start from the very beginning. With the plateau, the Iranian plateau isn't a plain or a valley. It's a massive stone table raised 3,000 to 6,000 feet above sea level. It's surrounded by mountain ranges to the north and south, swept by winds from Central Asia, scorched by heavy rains on the shores of the Caspian Sea. Living here has never been easy. Water is scarce. Arable land is limited to narrow strips along rivers. The summers are sweltering and the winters are freezing. And yet, it is here, on this harsh and beautiful plateau, that people have settled since time immemorial. Already 8,000 years ago, long before Egypt or Mesopotamia emerged in the forms we know, settled agricultural communities existed in what is now Iran. In the Zagros Mountains, people grew wheat and bred goats. They crafted clay pottery, painted with geometric patterns. They buried their dead right next to their homes, placing jewelry made of shells and turquoise in their graves. That same turquoise remains a symbol of Iran. To this day, in the 4th millennium BC, the Elamite civilization emerged in the southwest of the plateau. This was the first great political organism on Iranian soil. Elam isn't a Persian or Arabic word. It traces back to the Sumerian term for this land, the highland. The Elamites created their own writing system even before the Sumerians invented cuneiform. They built ziggurats. They traded with the Indus Valley and with Mesopotamia. Their kings fought against Babylon and Assyria, sometimes winning, sometimes losing, but always remaining a distinct force, a distinct world. But Elam was just one voice in the polyphonic history of the Iranian plateau. Running parallel to it were other cultures. The Jiroft culture in the southeast, with its mysterious stone vessels covered in mythological scenes. The Syalk culture in the center. The Shahdad culture, where gold and lapis lazuli were found. This wasn't a single state. It was a constellation of worlds, connected by trade routes and divided by mountain ranges. Chapter 2: the arrival of the Aryans and the first empires. Into this constellation, somewhere around the end of the second millennium BC, new people began to arrive from the north and from the east. They called themselves Aryans, from the word Arya, meaning something like noble or worthy. They spoke languages related to Sanskrit and Avestan. They brought horses, chariots, gods of thunder, and sacrificial rituals involving the pouring of homa, a sacred drink made from a plant whose exact identity remains unknown. They came in waves, not as a single flood. Among them were Medes, Persians, Parthians, Bactrians, and Scythians. The Medes settled in the northwest of the plateau, in the fertile valleys around Mount Damavand. The Persians moved further south to a region they called Parsa, which the Greeks later named Persis. At first, they were subjugated by the Assyrian Empire. Assyria pressured them from the west, collected tribute, took people into slavery, and destroyed their cities. Oddly enough, it was this Assyrian oppression that became the catalyst for uniting the Iranian tribes. The Medes rebelled first. In the late 7th century BC, their king, Cyaxares, formed an alliance with Babylonia and attacked Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrian Empire. In 612 BC, Nineveh fell. Assyria vanished from the world map almost instantly, with a staggering speed that still amazes historians today. The Median Kingdom became the first great Iranian power, stretching from Asia Minor to the borders of India. But Median greatness didn't last long. In 550 BC, a Persian king named Cyrus II, the man history would call the Great, led a rebellion against the Median king Astyages. Victory came quickly and was almost bloodless. According to ancient sources, the Median army simply defected to Cyrus. Astyages was captured, but not killed. Cyrus treated his defeated enemies with a leniency that was highly unusual for his time. This wasn't just a change of kings. This was the birth of the Achaemenid Empire, the first true world power. Chapter 3: The Achaemenid Empire, Cyrus and Darius. Cyrus II was a man who defied the usual categories of conqueror or tyrant. He conquered the Lydian kingdom in Asia Minor, but allowed the Lydian king Croesus to live at his court. He captured Babylon in 539 BC, but instead of destroying it, he entered as a liberator and made sacrifices to the Babylonian god Marduk. He freed the Jews from their Babylonian captivity and allowed them to return to Judea. This earned him the rare title of the Lord's Anointed in Jewish tradition, a unique honor for a non-Jew. The famous Cyrus cylinder, a clay barrel inscribed in cuneiform, discovered in Babylon in the 19th century, contains a proclamation. It upholds the right of peoples to their own religion, their own customs, and their own property. Some historians call it the first declaration of human rights. Others cautiously note that it was primarily a political proclamation, designed to win over conquered peoples. Most likely, both are right. Great political gestures are rarely purely selfless. After Cyrus, his son Cambyses conquered Egypt. Persia became the only empire in ancient history to span territories across 4 continents. Based on the geographical understanding of the time, under Darius I, who came to power around 522 BC after a series of palace coups and the suppression of rebellions, the Achaemenid Empire reached its greatest territorial extent. It stretched from Thrace in the west to the Indus River in the east, from Scythia in the north to Nubia in the south. An estimated 50 million people, nearly half the global population at the time, lived under the rule of the Persian king. Darius was, above all, an organizer. He created the administrative system that turned the Achaemenid Empire from a mere territory into a functioning state. He divided the empire into 23 satrapies, provinces ruled by satraps appointed by the king. He standardized weights and measures. He introduced a gold coin, the daric, which circulated throughout the empire. He built the Royal Road, a massive highway over 1,600 miles long, connecting Susa to Sardis. Along this road, mounted couriers could relay messages in a week over a distance that would take a traveler on foot 3 months. The grandest embodiment of all this majesty was Persepolis, a city Darius began building in 518 BC on a stone terrace in the mountains of Parsa. Persepolis wasn't a capital in the traditional sense. The government was in Susa, and Pasargadae served as the winter residence. Persepolis was a ceremonial center, a city symbol, a city ritual. This is where Nowruz, the Persian New Year, a holiday over 3,000 years old, still celebrated in Iran today, was observed every spring. In the Apadana, the main audience hall of Persepolis, the walls were covered with bas-reliefs. They depicted delegations from all the peoples of the empire, bringing gifts to the feet of the great king: Medes, Egyptians, Greeks, Indians, Ethiopians, Scythians. They all marched in one endless procession. These reliefs are striking in their serenity. There are no battles, no executions, no prisoners in chains, just a solemn movement toward the center of the universe, which the Achaemenids believed they and their palace were. Chapter 4: Alexander the Great and the Hellenistic Era. But it was exactly this splendor that caught the eye of an enemy who proved fatal. Alexander the Great crossed the Hellespont in 334 BC with an army of over 40,000 men. His campaign against Persia was lightning fast. By ancient standards, at Issus and Gaugamela, the Persian armies suffered crushing defeats. The Persian king Darius III fled east and was murdered by his own satrap, Bessus, in 330 BC. Alexander ordered him to be buried with royal honors. Alexander burned Persepolis to the ground. According to one version, he did it in a drunken stupor after a feast, egged on by an Athenian courtesan named Thais. According to another, it was a deliberate political act, revenge for the Greek temples the Persians had burned decades earlier. Most likely, it was a bit of both. Fire destroyed the wooden structures, charred the stone, and melted the gold. Within 200 years of Alexander's death, Persepolis was nothing but ruins. But while still alive, Alexander did something unexpected. He didn't just conquer Persia. He tried to become Persian. He wore Persian clothing. He introduced proskynesis to his court, the Persian ritual of bowing face down before the king. He married a Persian princess, Roxana, and organized a mass wedding where his generals married the daughters of Persian nobility. His Macedonian comrades were outraged. They saw it as betrayal. Alexander himself, it seems, saw it as the future, the merging of two worlds into one. Alexander died in Babylon in 323 BC. Before he even turned 33, his empire instantly fell apart. The Iranian plateau went to his general Seleucus and his descendants. The Hellenistic Seleucid kingdom held on for about 2 centuries, leaving a Greek imprint on Iranian culture in architecture, coinage, and names. Chapter 5: The Parthians and the Sassanids. But the Iranian soil proved stronger. Around 250 BC, on the eastern fringes of the Seleucid realm, the Parthians rose up. They were an Iranian nomadic tribe from the steppes east of the Caspian Sea. Their leader, Arsaces, founded the Arsacid dynasty. Slowly, over the course of a century, the Parthians expanded their power, pushing the Seleucids further west. By the mid-2nd century BC, they controlled all of Iran, Mesopotamia, and parts of Central Asia. The Parthian kingdom was structured differently than the Achaemenid Empire. It was more of a federation of powerful vassal rulers than a centralized state. The Parthian kings were pragmatists. They kept Greek inscriptions on their coins, supported Greek cities, and tolerated different religions. But at the same time, they revived Iranian traditions, the Persian language, and the Zoroastrian cult of fire. It was under the Parthians that Iran first clashed with Rome. The collision was inevitable. Both powers controlled key trade routes between East and West, and both laid claim to Mesopotamia. In 53 BC, at the Battle of Carrhae, Parthian cavalry commanded by Cyrena annihilated a Roman army of 70,000 men, led by Crassus. It was one of the heaviest defeats in Roman history. Crassus was killed, and the legionary eagles fell into Parthian hands. For several centuries, Rome and Parthia flexed their muscles along the Euphrates line, with varying success, and no decisive outcome. It was a clash of two systems, two worldviews: Rome with its legions, roads, and law; Parthia with its heavy cataphracts, steppe archers, and decentralized power. They couldn't destroy each other, and they couldn't coexist in peace. The Arsacid dynasty ruled for almost 5 centuries, an incredible lifespan by ancient standards. Its end came from within. In 224 AD, a young ruler named Ardashir, from the House of Sasan, who governed the small region of Pars in southern Iran, rebelled against the last Parthian king, Artabanus V. He defeated him and proclaimed himself Shahanshah, King of Kings. Thus began the Sassanid era. The Sassanids consciously framed themselves as the heirs of the Achaemenids. 400 years after the fall of that dynasty, they minted coins with Achaemenid symbols and built palaces with bas-reliefs stylized in the Achaemenid tradition. They turned Zoroastrianism into the state religion, something the Achaemenids had never done to such an extent. The sacred fire in the temple of Ctesiphon burned continuously as a symbol of eternal power. Zoroastrianism had already been around for about 1,000 years by then. Its founder, the prophet Zarathustra, lived somewhere between the 10th and 6th centuries BC. The exact dates are still debated. His teachings were based on the cosmic struggle between two primordial forces: Ahura Mazda, the embodiment of light and goodness, and Angra Mainyu, the embodiment of darkness and evil. According to Zarathustra, the world is the arena for this battle. Humans are free to choose a side. At the end of time, good will triumph, the dead will be resurrected, and all creation will be purified. Many scholars see Zoroastrianism as a forerunner to the Abrahamic religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Dualism, the resurrection of the dead, the Last Judgment, angels, and demons. A messianic figure, the Saoshant. All of these concepts are found in the Avesta, the sacred book of the Zoroastrians. Whether this influence was direct is still an open question. But there is no doubt that the Jews, during their Persian captivity and subsequent liberation by Cyrus, came into contact with Zoroastrian ideas. Under the Sassanids, Zoroastrianism became the official ideology. The priests, the Magi, gained enormous influence. A rigid class society was created, priests, warriors, scribes, and farmers. Social mobility was restricted. Dissenters, Manichaeans, Christians, Buddhists were periodically persecuted. But even this didn't make Sassanid Iran monolithic. Christian communities thrived in Mesopotamia, and Jewish academies in Stisifon and Nehardea compiled the Babylonian Talmud. The foreign policy of the Sassanids was marked by the same relentless struggle with their western neighbor, now the Byzantine Empire, the heir to Rome. Wars came in waves. King Shapur I, in the 3rd century AD, captured the Roman Emperor Valerian, an event entirely without precedent. It was such an unbelievable triumph that Shapur ordered it carved into the cliffs at Nakhche Rostam, right next to the tombs of the Achaemenid kings. The zenith of Sassanid power came during the reign of Khosrow I, Anushirvan, the immortal soul in the 6th century AD. He implemented tax reforms, strengthened the army, and built new cities. Greek philosophers, who had fled Athens after Justinian closed the Platonic Academy, worked at his court. Khosrow I was deeply interested in philosophy and ordered the translation of Indian books into Persian, including the Panchatantra, which later spread around the world. It was a time when Ctesiphon could rightly be considered one of the global centers of knowledge. Chapter 6: The Arab Conquest and the Islamization of Iran. But after a century of prosperity came a century of exhaustion. The wars with Byzantium became protracted and ruinous. In the early 7th century AD, a Persian army under General Sharbaraz captured Egypt, Syria, and Palestine. Jerusalem was taken, and the Persians carried off the True Cross. It seemed the Sassanid Empire was on the brink of a new era of great conquests. But Byzantium held strong. A counteroffensive by Emperor Heraclius devastated Mesopotamia. Persia was forced to return all conquered lands. Both empires emerged from these wars, bled dry, exhausted, and disillusioned. The armies had lost their fighting spirit. The treasuries were empty. The population was sick of taxes and military drafts. Political instability at court was so severe that, over a span of 4 years, from 628 to 632 AD, Iran saw 8 different kings. The country was ready to collapse from the slightest push. The push came from the south, from the Arabian deserts. In 622 AD, the Prophet Muhammad made the Hijra, the migration from Mecca to Medina, which became the starting point of the Islamic calendar. Over 10 years, he united the fractured Arab tribes under the banner of a new faith. After his death in 632, his successors, the caliphs, launched military campaigns whose speed and success have baffled historians ever since. The Arab armies were motivated by faith, the promise of plunder, and a sense of divine mission. Standing against them was a Persian army, demoralized by internal strife and lacking a unified command. In 636, at the Battle of Al-Qadisiyah, the Arabs crushed the Persians. The final blow came in 642 at Nahavand. The last Sassanid king, Yazdegerd III, fled east, trying to rally his forces. But he was killed in 651, not by enemies, but by a random miller who robbed him, without realizing he was the king. Iran became part of the Arab Caliphate. This wasn't just a change of government, it was a religious revolution. Zoroastrianism, which had reigned for millennia, was suddenly a minority religion. The fires on many altars went out. Some Zoroastrians fled to India. Their descendants live there to this day, known as Parsis. Those who stayed gradually accepted Islam. some out of conviction, some under pressure. But here is the paradox that constantly amazes historians. Iran accepted Islam, but simultaneously Iranized Islam. The Persian language survived, Persian culture survived. What's more, it became one of the main languages of Islamic civilization. By the 9th century AD, the greatest poets and scientists of the Muslim world were writing in Persian. The Arab Caliphate became Persian from the inside, just as Sassanid Iran had absorbed Greek, Parthian, and Roman influences without losing its core identity. This transformation was slow and painful. The first 2 centuries after the Arab conquest were a time of profound rupture. The Persian aristocracy, the priests, the scribes, many lost their status, their property, and their familiar world. The taxation of non-Muslims created a powerful incentive to convert. Arab garrisons were stationed in the cities. Arabic became the language of law, religion, and administration. And yet, the cultural fabric didn't tear. Iranians found their own path within Islam. The Shia movement, which initially began as a political dispute over the rightful succession to power in the Arab world, found fertile ground in Iran. In 680 AD, Hussein ibn Ali, the grandson of Prophet Muhammad, was killed at Karbala, along with a small band of followers while fighting against the massive army of the Umayyad Caliph. This event became to Shia Islam what Golgotha is to Christianity, a sacred tragedy, an eternal source of grief, martyrdom, and hope. Iranians, a people with an ancient tradition of sacred kingship and sacrificial myths, embraced the story of Karbala deeply. The mourning for Hussein, Ashura, evolved in Iran into the most profound religious observance, blending Arab history with Persian temperament. This fusion eventually turned Iran into the global center of Shia Islam, a position it holds to this day. Chapter 7. The Islamic Golden Age and the Persian Renaissance. In the 8th century, a coup took place that reshaped the entire Islamic world. The Abbasids, a new dynasty heavily backed by Iranian supporters, overthrew the Umayyads and moved the capital of the caliphate from Damascus to a brand new city, Baghdad. Built in 762 AD in Mesopotamia, on the banks of the Tigris, it was a highly symbolic shift. Power moved from Arab Syria back to the Iranian Mesopotamian heartland. The Abbasid Caliphate, especially during the reigns of Harun al-Rashid and al-Mamun, ushered in an era of unprecedented cultural flourishing. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad translated Greek, Persian, and Indian texts into Arabic. Mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy flourished under the generous patronage of the caliphs. And driving much of this golden age were Iranians. There was the powerful Barmakid family of viziers, the polymath al-Biruni from Khwarazm, the physician Ibn Sina, Avicenna from Bukhara, and the mathematician al-Khwarizmi, whose name gave us the word algorithm. Gradually, however, the caliphate weakened. Power shifted to Turkic military guards, and provinces began to break away. It was during this exact period, in the 9th and 10th centuries AD, that the Persian Renaissance began, an astonishing revival of Persian literature and national consciousness. The poet Rudaki, who lived at the court of the Samanid dynasty in Bukhara in the late 9th and early 10th centuries, is considered the father of classical Persian poetry. The Samanids themselves were of Iranian descent, and under their rule, Persian regained its official status as a language of literature and administration. For the first time in 200 years, Iranians could write in Persian for official purposes. And then came Ferdowsi, Abul Qasim Ferdowsi, a poet from Tus in Khorasan, spent 30 years from 977 to 1010 AD writing the Shahnameh, or the Book of Kings. It's a massive epic, about 60,000 couplets, that tells the history of Iran from the creation of the world up to the Arab conquest. It contains myths about the first kings, legends of Rostam and Sohrab, stories of Darius and Alexander, and tales of the Sassanid Shahs. The Shahnameh is more than just literature. It was an act of cultural salvation. Ferdowsi created a book that preserved the Persian language in its classical form, a book that Iranians have never stopped reading and quoting since. Legend says Ferdowsi wrote the Shahnameh for Sultan Mahmud of Ghazni, expecting a promised reward of gold coins for every couplet. Mahmud, however, sent silver instead. Insulted, the poet wrote a bitter satire against his patron and fled from Ghazni. Whether it's completely true or not, the story is beautiful because of what it signifies. A great work is created in defiance of the power it supposedly serves. Chapter 8: Turks, Mongols, and the Ashes of Empires. The 11th and 12th centuries brought a new wave of conquerors, the Seljuk Turks. A nomadic people from Central Asia, they had subjugated all of Iran, Iraq, Syria, and Asia Minor by the mid-11th century. Under their rule, the classical Sunni institution of the madrasa was established as a tool for religious education and state stabilization. The great vizier Nizam al-Mulk wrote the Siyasat-Nama, the Book of Government, one of the world's first treatises on statecraft. It was also during the Seljuk era that Omar Khayyam lived and worked, a poet, mathematician, and astronomer. His quatrains about wine, love, and the fleeting nature of existence, translated into English in the 19th century by Edward Fitzgerald, became some of the most famous examples of Persian poetry in the West. Khayyam himself most likely wrote them as philosophical reflections rooted in the Sufi tradition. But they were embraced globally as the revelations of a free thinker, savoring life in the face of death. Both interpretations are probably right. The 13th century brought Iran the greatest catastrophe in its entire history. The Mongols, led by Genghis Khan, began their march west around 1220. What they did to Iranian cities was utter annihilation. Nishapur, once one of the largest cities in the world with a population of hundreds of thousands, was razed to the ground. Mur, another great city of Khorasan, met the same fate. Persian historians recount death tolls that seem unfathomable. Millions dead in just a few years. Modern demographic estimates suggest that Iran's population was cut in half during the Mongol period. The intricate irrigation systems, without which agriculture on the Iranian plateau is impossible, were destroyed. Fields lay barren. Many regions never fully recovered. If Achaemenid Iran built cities as the embodiment of order, the Mongol invasion was the epitome of unprovoked total chaos. But even here, history repeated itself. The Mongols came, and eventually, they became Iranians. Hulagu, the grandson of Genghis Khan, founded the Ilkhanate in Iran in 1258, the exact same year he besieged and destroyed Baghdad, drowning the last Abbasid caliph, al-Mustasim, in blood. The early Mongol rulers were Buddhists or Nestorian Christians, but by the early 14th century, the Ilkhan Ghazan converted to Islam. His court began speaking Persian. His officials studied Persian administration. His court historian Rashid al-Din Hamadani wrote the Jami al-Tawarikh, the Compendium of Chronicles, the first truly universal history covering China, India, Iran, the Arab world, and Europe. It was the same story all over again. Conquerors settle down, accept Islam, learn Persian, and within 2 generations, they become Persian rulers. In the late 14th century, Iran suffered another devastation: the invasions of Timur, Tamerlane, a warlord from Samarkand who built pyramids out of severed heads as monuments to his presence. After Timur's attack, Isfahan allegedly lost 70,000 people. And once again, just as after the Mongols, the country slowly rose from the ashes. Chapter 9: The Safavids, the Forging of Shah Iran. Out of those ruins, in the early 16th century, a new power emerged, and it wasn't just another change of rulers. In 1501, Ismail I, the leader of the Safavid Sufi order, captured Tabriz and proclaimed himself Shah of Iran. He was only 14 years old. Within a few years, he had united all of Iran under his rule, displaying extraordinary ruthlessness towards his enemies and boundless energy for reorganization. Immediately, he did something revolutionary. He declared Shia Islam the state religion of Iran. Before this, the majority of Iranians had been Sunnis. The transformation of the country into a Shia state was enforced, sometimes brutally, over several generations. Sunni scholars were exiled or executed. Shia clerics from Arab centers in Iraq and Lebanon were brought in to head religious institutions. Ashura was elevated into a state-sponsored ritual. Why did the Safavids do this? Partly out of sincere religious conviction and partly out of political calculation. Iran was surrounded by Sunni empires, the Ottoman Empire to the west, and the Uzbek Khanates to the east. Shi'ism became a religious shield, forging a distinct identity separate from its neighbors. Iran needed to know what made it different from Turkey. Now, it did. The standoff with the Ottoman Empire became the central conflict of the Safavid era. At the Battle of Chaldiran in 1514, the Safavids suffered a crushing defeat. Ottoman artillery decimated the Persian cavalry, but Iran survived, retreated, regrouped, and solidified its borders into something permanent. The peak of Safavid power was the reign of Shah Abbas I, the Great, from 1587 to 1629. Abbas moved the capital to Isfahan and turned it into one of the most beautiful cities in the world. Naqsh-e-Jahan Square, meaning image of the world, was built to dazzle the imagination of anyone who stepped foot in it. The Shah Mosque with its incredible blue dome, the Ali Kapu Palace, the bazaars with their endless labyrinths, the Sio Paul Bridge with its 33 arches over the Zayander River. Isfahan became the ultimate embodiment of the Iranian concept of beauty, precise, geometric, rich in detail, yet never garish. Abbas modernized the military, creating musket corps modeled after the Ottoman Janissaries. He actively traded with Europeans, namely the British and Dutch East India Companies. He relocated entire populations, moving Armenians from Jolfa to a suburb of Isfahan, where they built their churches and ran the silk trade. Georgians, Circassians, Kurds. He wove everyone into his system of power, creating an ethnically mixed elite loyal to him personally rather than to their tribal chiefs. Chapter 10: The Qajars and the Great Game. After the death of Abbas the Great, the Safavid Empire slowly faded. In 1722, an Afghan tribe called the Ghilzais captured Isfahan. The last Safavid Shah, Sultan Hussein, surrendered without a fight. Some say out of exhaustion and apathy, others say he realized resistance was futile. Iran was plunged back into chaos, but not for long. Nader Shah, a brilliant military commander from a Turkmen tribe, rose from military regent to proclaim himself Shah in 1736. He possessed both exceptional tactical genius and absolute ruthlessness. He expelled the Afghans, restored Iran's borders, and even invaded India. In 1739, he sacked Delhi and carried away the legendary Peacock Throne and the Koh-i-Noor diamond. His Indian campaign was lightning fast and devastating. It's estimated he looted wealth worth billions of modern rupees from Delhi. Nader was a brutal ruler, executing even his own sons on suspicion of treason. He tried to forge a new religious concept of Islamic unity, reconciling Sunnis and Shias, but failed. After his assassination in 1747, the country fell into power struggles once again. The Zand dynasty, which ruled from 1750 to 1779, left a relatively peaceful memory. Karim Khan Zand modestly titled himself not Shah, but Vakil, representative of the people. Under him, Shiraz bloomed again as a cultural hub. It is in Shiraz that Hafez and Sadi are buried, two of the greatest Persian poets, whose verses Iranians quote by heart the way other cultures quote proverbs. At the end of the 18th century, the Turkic Qajar tribal confederation seized power. Their founder, Aga Muhammad Khan, had a life story defined by brutality. Captured and castrated as a child by an enemy, he grew into a cold, calculating warlord who personally oversaw the bloody sack of Tbilisi in 1795. He moved the capital to Tehran, then just a small town at the foothills of the Alborz Mountains. Tehran remains the capital of Iran today. The Qajar period was the time when Iran faced a new kind of threat, one it had never known before. Not a rapid military conquest, but a slow, suffocating absorption. Two great powers, Russia and Britain, turned Iran into the arena of their imperial rivalry, a standoff known in London and St. Petersburg as the Great Game. Under the Treaty of Gulistan in 1813, following a defeat in the Russo-Persian War, Iran ceded the entire South Caucasus to Russia, Georgia, Azerbaijan, and most of Armenia. After another war, the Treaty of Turkmenchay in 1828 cemented and expanded those losses. Russia gained the exclusive right to maintain a naval fleet on the Caspian Sea and extraterritorial rights for its subjects in Iran. These humiliations burned deeply in the Iranian psyche. Poets wrote elegies for the lost lands, and nationalist officials dreamed of revenge. But the army was weak, the treasury was empty, and the Shah was powerless. Britain, for its part, controlled trade through the Persian Gulf and exerted massive political influence over the south of the country. In 1891, Shah Nasser al-Din sold a monopoly on the tobacco trade to a British company. This sparked a massive national boycott. Persian merchants, clerics, and ordinary citizens simply stopped smoking. The Shah was forced to cancel the concession. It was the first time in Iranian history that an organized grassroots civilian movement stopped a ruler's decree. The seed of future revolutions had been planted. In 1905, the Shah sold a concession to a British company to build and manage customs. This sparked the Constitutional Revolution of 1905 to 1911, the first democratic revolution in Asia. Merchants, intellectuals, and parts of the clergy united to demand a constitution and a parliament, the Majlis. In 1906, on his deathbed, Shah Mozaffar ad-Din signed the constitution. The Majlis convened. It seemed Iran was on the threshold of a new future. But the new Shah, Muhammad Ali, struck a secret deal with Russia. In 1908, he bombarded the Majlis building with artillery, scattered the deputies, and executed the leaders of the constitutional movement. Freedom was strangled with the help of Russian Cossacks. However, it didn't last. In 1909, the constitutionalists regained control and ousted Muhammad Ali. Yet, the country remained destitute, carved up into spheres of influence. Russian in the north, British in the south, essentially stripped of its sovereignty. World War I turned Iran into a battlefield for Russian, British, Ottoman, and German troops, despite its official neutrality. Famine, disease, and chaos ensued. The country lost an estimated 2 million people to starvation alone between 1917 and 1919. The Spanish flu added to the death toll. Chapter 11. The Pahlavi Dynasty and Mossadegh. Against the backdrop of an exhausted, humiliated nation, a man named Reza Khan emerged. He was the commander of the Cossack Brigade, a military unit created and trained by the Russians. In February 1921, he orchestrated a coup, captured Tehran, and took control of the government. Within a few years, he eliminated all rivals, crushed regional rebellions, and disarmed the tribes. In 1925, the last Qajar Shah was deposed, and Reza Khan proclaimed himself Shah, founding the new Pahlavi dynasty. Reza Shah aimed to build a modern Iranian state, modeled after his neighbors. The secular Turkey of Ataturk was an obvious inspiration. He built roads, railways, and factories. He mandated European clothing. In 1936, he banned women from wearing the hijab and forbade men from wearing traditional headwear. He founded the University of Tehran. He initiated land reforms. He insisted the international community use the name Iran instead of Persia in official documents, appealing to the nation's Aryan roots and distancing the country from the exoticized Arabian Nights image of the Orient. His methods were iron-fisted. Political opposition was suppressed. The press was censored. Tribal leaders, once fiercely independent, were broken or killed. Religious scholars, stripped of their control over education and the courts, harbored deep resentments. But the country was visibly changing. Roads were paved where only trails used to be. The urban population grew. Literacy rates soared. In 1941, Iran once again became a victim of its geography. The Soviet Union and Great Britain, having become allies after Germany attacked the USSR, jointly occupied Iran. Soviet troops took the north. The British took the south. Reza Shah, suspected of Nazi sympathies, was forced to abdicate in favor of his son, Mohammad Reza. He died in exile in South Africa in 1944. The young Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, only 21 years old when he ascended the throne, inherited a country occupied by foreign armies once again. Initially, he was weak and inexperienced. The Majlis came back to life. The press found its voice again. Political parties, from liberals to the Communist Today Party, re-entered the arena. In this atmosphere, in the early 1950s, a figure rose to prominence who became a symbol of Iran's unfulfilled dream of sovereignty. Mohammad Mossadegh, a European-educated lawyer and veteran Majlis deputy. He led the movement to nationalize Iranian oil. Since 1909, Iranian oil had been extracted and exported by the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, a British enterprise that paid Iran meager royalties, barred Iranian auditors from its books, and kept Iranian laborers in conditions akin to a colony. Oil workers in Khuzestan lived in slums, right next to the luxurious villas of British managers. In 1951, Mossadegh became prime minister and immediately pushed a bill through the Majlis nationalizing the oil industry. Crowds of Iranians rejoiced. Britain responded with an embargo. and rallied for an international boycott of Iranian oil. Mossadegh traveled to the UN, spoke in The Hague, and met with Eisenhower in Washington. Time magazine put him on its cover as Man of the Year. In August 1953, the CIA and British MI6 orchestrated a coup, famously known as Operation Ajax. Paid mobs ransacked the offices of Mossadegh's supporters, while army units seized key installations. Mossadegh was arrested, put on trial, convicted, and spent the rest of his life under house arrest at his estate in Ahmadabad. He died in 1967. The Shah, who had briefly fled the country during the chaos, returned to power. But now, everyone knew exactly how he was kept in power. Chapter 12: The White Revolution and the Islamic Revolution. For the next 25 years, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi ruled, relying on the military, his secret police, Savak, and American backing. His White Revolution of 1963, a program involving land reform, women's suffrage, and literacy campaigns, did fundamentally change the country. The Iranian economy grew rapidly. Oil revenues after the 1973 price boom allowed him to finance grandiose projects. In 1971, the Shah threw an unprecedented party at Persepolis to celebrate the 2500th anniversary of the Iranian monarchy. Tents pitched amidst the Achaemenid ruins were designed by the best Parisian fashion houses. Meals were prepared by Michelin-starred chefs. Heads of state from dozens of countries flew in. The Shah, in full military dress, stood before the tombs of Cyrus and Darius as their living heir. The Iranian public watched this with mixed feelings. Some saw the rebirth of a great power. Others saw a senseless squandering of oil wealth. Religious scholars viewed the promotion of pre-Islamic Persian glory as a departure from Islam, a return to a pagan fire-worshipping past. Ayatollah Khomeini, who had been in exile since 1964, first in Iraq, then in France, called the Persepolis celebration the Devil's Festival. Opposition to the Shah was highly fragmented. Left-wing nationalists remembered Mossadegh. The Communist Tudeh Party had deep networks among the working class. Islamic revolutionaries saw the Shah as a servant of American interests. Liberal intellectuals, along with figures like Ali Shariati, who conceptualized Red Shi'ism, a revolutionary interpretation of Islam, created an ideological synthesis that was incredibly appealing to the youth. Savak, the Shah's secret police, built with the help of the CIA and Israel's Mossad, responded to dissent with arrests, torture, and executions. This made the regime universally hated, even among those who generally supported modernization. The shared hatred for Savak united people who had absolutely nothing else in common regarding the country's future. In 1978, the tension reached a boiling point from which there was no turning back. The trigger was a newspaper article filled with insulting attacks on Khomeini, clearly orchestrated by the government. Students took to the streets in the holy city of Qom. The police opened fire, and several people were killed. According to the Shia mourning cycle, demonstrations were held on the 40th day after the deaths. Again, there was shooting. And again, there were deaths. Every new 40-day cycle multiplied the body count and the fury of the streets. In September 1978, in Tehran's Jaleh Square, an event later dubbed Black Friday, troops fired into the crowd. Official figures claimed a few dozen dead. The opposition claimed hundreds. The exact numbers are still debated, but the effect was undeniable. The country had passed the point of no return. In January 1979, the Shah left Iran, officially on vacation, but in reality, forever. He died in 1980 in Egypt, where Anwar Sadat granted him asylum. On February 1st, 1979, an Air France jet landed in Tehran. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, 77 years old, wearing black robes and a white beard, stepped off the plane. 2 million people were waiting for him. At the airport and in the streets, a reporter asked him, "What do you feel returning to Iran after 15 years in exile?" Khomeini replied, "Nothing." Though Khomeini likely meant something spiritual, the reality was clear. He hadn't returned to feel. He had returned to act. The Islamic Revolution moved incredibly fast. Within weeks, the monarchy collapsed. The army declared neutrality and then defected to the revolution. The millennia-old tradition of Iranian monarchy was abolished by referendum. In April 1979, over 98% of voters chose to establish an Islamic republic. Khomeini introduced the concept of Vilayat-e-Faqih, the guardianship of the Islamic jurist, positioning a religious scholar as the ultimate political and spiritual authority. The revolution quickly began devouring its own allies. Leftists, liberals, Kurds, the Mujahideen, everyone who had participated in overthrowing the Shah, suddenly found themselves enemies of the new regime. Executions followed executions. Thousands of people were shot in a matter of years. Chapter 13: Hostages, War, and Modern Decades. Meanwhile, an event unfolded that pushed all internal contradictions into the shadows. In November 1979, Islamist students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, taking 52 American diplomats hostage. They demanded the extradition of the Shah, who was undergoing medical treatment in the U.S. at the time. The crisis lasted 444 days. The hostages were finally released in January 1981, on the exact day of Ronald Reagan's inauguration, a timing that has fueled political suspicion ever since. The U.S. severed diplomatic relations with Iran, and they remain broken to this day. And then came Iraq. In September 1980, Saddam Hussein invaded Iran, clearly hoping to capitalize on the chaos of the revolution. It was a fatal miscalculation. The war he planned to win in a few weeks dragged on for 8 years, becoming one of the bloodiest conflicts of the late 20th century. Iranian society rallied in the face of the invasion. Paradoxically, the revolution achieved through war what it couldn't achieve on its own: national unity against a foreign threat. Basij volunteers rushed to the front lines, many of them teenagers. Some wore plastic keys around their necks, the symbolic keys to paradise that preachers told them awaited after death. Khomeini rejected peace offers in 1982, when Iran successfully pushed the Iraqis off its territory. He didn't just want peace. He wanted victory in the export of the revolution. That decision prolonged the war by 6 more years. The Iraqi army, backed by Western nations and Arab Gulf monarchies, used chemical weapons. Iranian cities were relentlessly bombed. Khuzestan, the oil-rich province, was turned into a scorched battlefield. Over 8 years, an estimated 300,000 to 1 million Iranians perished. In July 1988, Khomeini finally accepted a UN ceasefire resolution, famously comparing the decision to drinking a chalice of poison. The truce changed nothing territorially. The borders remained virtually the same as before the war. A few months later, in February 1989, Khomeini issued a fatwa calling for the death of British author Salman Rushdie over his book, The Satanic Verses, isolating Iran from Western Europe even further. Khomeini died in June 1989. A crowd of several million people poured into the streets of Tehran. to mourn him. He was succeeded by Ali Khamenei, the former president, a less charismatic but more cautious figure. Political control consolidated under him. Akbar Hashemi Rafsanjani, a pragmatist focused on economic rebuilding, became president. Iran cautiously began to open up to the world. The 1990s were a time of slow reconstruction. The war was in the past. Oil revenues allowed the rebuilding of infrastructure. But more importantly, the youth, the product of the demographic boom of the 70s and 80s, made Iran one of the youngest countries in the world. They grew up, got educated, and dreamed of a different life. In 1997, Mohammad Khatami, a reformist who advocated for a dialogue of civilizations, expanded civil liberties and the rule of law, was elected president. His landslide victory, with over 70% of the vote, shocked the conservative establishment. Youth, women, and educated urbanites voted for change. But Khatami's reforms hit a brick wall of resistance. From the conservative judiciary and the Guardian Council, pro-reform newspapers were shut down. The student protests of 1999 were violently crushed. By the end of his second term, Khatami was paralyzed. Institutions he didn't control blocked his every move. The disillusionment with the reform movement paved the way for Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the mayor of Tehran who rose from the poor southern districts. A populist who appealed to the poor and war veterans, his election in 2005 was a shock to many and a signal to the world that Iranian politics was becoming unpredictable. Once again, Ahmadinejad did several things that drastically worsened Iran's international standing. He denied the Holocaust at the UN. He stated that Israel should be wiped off the map, though the exact translation of this phrase is still highly contested. He accelerated Iran's nuclear program. Western nations imposed crippling sanctions. The Iranian rial began to plummet. During the 2009 presidential elections, when most observers expected the reformist Mir Hossein Mousavi to win, official results declared Ahmadinejad the victor. Millions of Iranians took to the streets, wearing green ribbons, the symbol of the Green Movement. The government responded with arrests and live ammunition. Neda Aga Sultan, a young woman shot during the protests, became the tragic face of the uprising. Her death was captured on a cell phone and broadcast around the world. The Green Movement was crushed. Mousavi and another reformist candidate, Mehdi Karoubi, were placed under house arrest, where they remain to this day. But the memory of the movement didn't die. It settled deep into social networks, quiet conversations, and the personal histories of millions. In 2013, Hassan Rouhani, a moderate politician who promised to reboot relations with the West through nuclear negotiations, became president. In 2015, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, the JCPOA, was signed in Vienna, a landmark deal where Iran agreed to limit its nuclear program in exchange for the lifting of international sanctions. It was arguably the biggest diplomatic breakthrough in decades. But in 2018, US President Donald Trump unilaterally pulled out of the agreement and reinstated sanctions. The Iranian economy plunged back into crisis, with inflation reaching astronomical levels. The moderate Rouhani found himself in the same dead end as Khatami 20 years earlier. His tools were simply weaker than the forces opposing change. In January 2020, an American drone strike killed General Qasem Soleimani, commander of the Quds Force, Iran's most famous and revered military leader, a hero of the Iran-Iraq War, and the architect of Iran's regional influence. His death sparked massive mourning and fury. Iranian missiles struck US bases in Iraq. For a few days, the world held its breath, fearing a massive war. The war didn't happen, but the tension remained. In 2022, massive protests erupted across the country under the slogan, "Woman, Life, Freedom." Following the death of Mahsa Amini, a young woman who died in the custody of the morality police after being arrested for improperly wearing her hijab. The protests swept through every province. Young women tore off their headscarves and burned them. Young men stood by their sides in the streets. The regime responded once again with arrests and executions. It was another cycle of grief, rage, and suppression. Chapter 14, Conclusion, the Unbreakable Thread. Looking at Iranian history from a distance, taking in the full sweep of 3,000 years, dozens of peoples, hundreds of rulers, multiple world religions, waves of conquerors, and waves of renaissances, one cannot help but notice a singular truth. The Iranian civilization possesses an extraordinary resilience. You can't really call it flexibility in the usual sense, because flexibility implies yielding. Iran didn't yield. It absorbed. It didn't adapt to its conquerors. It digested them. Macedonians, Parthians, Arabs, Mongols, Turks. They all arrived with brutal force, arrogance, and grand plans. And in the end, they all found themselves enveloped in Persian culture. They spoke Persian, built in the Persian style, and patronized Persian poetry. Conquests didn't destroy Iranian civilization. They enriched it, sometimes at the cost of unimaginable suffering. Perhaps the secret of this resilience lies in the language itself. The Persian language has an extraordinary quality. It is soft, melodic, rich in synonyms, and steeped in poetic traditions. You can express nuances in Persian that take paragraphs to explain in other languages. Iranians know stanzas from the Shahnameh, Hafez, and Sadi by heart, from childhood. And this isn't just literature. It is the archive of their collective memory, where their values, their history, and their ways of understanding the world are encoded. Perhaps the secret lies in the Zoroastrian heritage that has survived a millennium of Islamic dominance. Nowruz, the Persian New Year, tied to the spring equinox and dating back to pre-Zoroastrian times, is celebrated in Iran with no less passion than Islamic holidays. It involves fire, fresh greenery, and 7 symbolic items on the holiday table. These are not Islamic, but pre-Islamic symbols. The authorities have tried to restrict Nowruz twice, once during the early Abbasid period and again under the early revolutionary governments. They failed both times. Perhaps the secret lies in that unique Iranian sense of historical continuity, what historians call civilizational consciousness. They live with the weight of millennia at their backs. This gives them a profound resilience in the face of failure, and a profound bitterness when the present fails to match the greatness of the past. It is exactly this bitterness and this greatness that fuel Iranian politics, Iranian culture, and the Iranian debates about the future. When an Iranian politician or poet speaks of national dignity, they are appealing to this deep history. When Iranian youth take to the streets, behind them stand not only today's grievances, but a centuries-old tradition of resisting injustice. Iran is a country that has never been fully understood from the outside. It has been viewed as an outpost of terrorism and as the cradle of civilization. As a strict theocracy, and as a society with one of the highest ratios of educated women in Asia, as a closed state, and as a nation with an incredibly open, curious, and hospitable people, all of these things are true. Iran is full of contradictions between the state and society, between tradition and modernity, between official Islam and grassroots practices, between revolutionary slogans and the ordinary desires of its people. These contradictions aren't an anomaly. They are simply the Iranian way of existing in the world. Today, on Iranian soil, the ruins of Persepolis still stand. Scorched columns, staircases carved with reliefs, stone bulls at the gates. Tourists come and take pictures. Iranian schoolchildren go there on field trips. Just 12 miles away is Naksh-e-Rostam, the cliff-faced necropolis where the tombs of Achaemenid kings and the reliefs of Sassanid victories are carved into the rock. All of this rests beneath the same Iranian sky, next to the same mountains. A few hours' drive away lies Isfahan, with its blue domes. In the bazaars of Tehran, Isfahan, and Tabriz, merchants still trade the exact same way they traded under the Safavids, selling Persian rugs, saffron, turquoise, and copperware. The smell of spices in the covered arcades hasn't changed in centuries. Old men in tea houses sip tea from small glasses with a sugar cube tucked in their cheeks, just as their grandfathers did. In the evenings, young people search on their phones for things the government forbids, and they find them. The space between the official narrative and the living reality is vast and full of life. Iranian history hasn't ended. It continues, as it always has, through ruptures and syntheses, through suppression and rebirth, through official edicts and lively debates over what it means to be Iranian today. This debate happens in the coffee shops of Tehran, in university lecture halls, in the expatriate neighborhoods of Los Angeles and Toronto, and in the text messages of young Iranians across the globe. No conquest has ever been able to silence it. No revolution has ever managed to put a final period on this debate. Thank you for watching World's Undercurrents. May tonight be long and peaceful. May everything said today about millennia, about cities, about kings and poets, about wars and silence, settle slowly like dust over the columns of Persepolis at sunset. History's in no rush. It knows how to wait. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to World's Undercurrents and turn on notifications so you never miss the next deep dive into hidden history.